So there are two loose heads just floating around in here somewhere?
You can hear them at night. They whisper to each other and then cry.
Since our host isn't here, would anyone care to mix me a drink?
Horror films ask us many questions. Who will survive and what will be left of them? Who's going to believe a talking head? What's blood for if not for shedding? Do you like scary movies? Have you checked the children? Maybe we'll find the answers together. Thank you for joining us on Photo Flow, Terror in the Smiles. Here are your hosts, Eric Jones and Jake Almond.
Good evening. I'm your host.
Hey Eric, what's up, man?
What's good?
All right, I have my notes ready.
There's a fuck.
I'm gonna let you lead off with Psycho.
All right. All right, everyone. So today we'll be talking about one classic and one what the hell movie. But
I think it's a classic, but that's just
I'm sure I will probably actually get to that point eventually. I'm just still on my initial viewing of it.
You're still in shock.
Yes.
So I tried to intentionally not to tell you anything about Re-Animator. I wanted you just to experience it, and it sounds like you didn't really read too much on it either, and I don't know how much of it you saw, so I'm gonna just let you lead off as far as what your experience, since this is the first time we've done a movie where you had never seen it before.
Yeah. Yes. First, okay. So, first thing I'll say is, I was wondering what I was watching when the opening credits came on, and I heard a variation, but not so. Actually, it wasn't. It actually wasn't even subtle. We just finished discussing Psycho, and here goes Re-Animator opening its credits with basically sort of a knockoff version of Bernard Herrmann's score of for Psycho. And it's funny, the credits sort of remind the visuals of the credits remind you of Saul Bass, who designed the credits for Psycho, also for Hitchcock's Vertigo. That's what it reminded me of.
And it was intentionally an homage to Vertigo, especially like the
okay,
music,
so that was it, because I didn't read up on it afterwards. I just that was just the first thing I noticed. I was like, but you know what? When that happened, I was like, okay. I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna get into this, because here goes this movie, and the first thing it does is it pays homage to a director whose works I love.
Okay,
I'm like, okay, cool.
But the first thing it does is open with a scene where a guy's eyeballs burst.
That's right. Oh, that's right. That did,
and then it jumps to
was
this opening credits, and I'm thinking, this movie is going to kind of let you know what you're watching right away, and that's what you think. You think you're okay. The guy's eyeballs burst. Okay, I thought, going back to my first time watching it, the exact same thing you did. This music, what is this music from? This isn't new. This is what is this? And the opening credits threw me off too, because I had just watched Vertigo like a couple weeks before the first time I saw Re-Animator, and I had just watched it because I had bought that Alfred Hitchcock box set on Blu-ray, and Vertigo was one of the movies that I had seen only one time, so I had popped it in to watch it again, and I was just as confused as you, because and I'll say this, and then I want you to continue. H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator, and it's barely based off of the H.P. Lovecraft Re-Animator. It's much more based off of them wanting to do their own riff on Frankenstein. So here we have a movie that says it's an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, but it's really a remake of, or a sort of their own version of Frankenstein, that uses Vertigo's opening credits and Psycho's music score. It's the craziest thing. Anyway, so what would? All right, opening credits. What I want you to take me on this journey.
So, all right, so yeah, then we get the opening credits, and I'm trying to remember, was like the introduction to Herbert West when he gets kicked out, was that before or after the credits? I guess
Well, he's in Sweden, and then I don't think he's kicked out because I think that he's like they couldn't prove exactly what it was that caused the doctor's eyeballs to explode.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think he killed the guy. I think he just like whatever happened, Herbert was there and tried to reanimate his corpse. But he's now in wherever this movie takes place at. I believe it was shot in Los Angeles, but he's now in medical school, and I'm guessing he was in Sweden as I don't know if he was part of the same medical school or if he transferred to this medical school, but I take it that he transferred there. And our first like proper introduction to him is he walked like we get introduced to Dan, and then the scene where Dan uh is with the is he with the dean or is he with the doctor?
I think he was with Megan, the daughter first, I believe. I think.
Yeah, so I can't remember now, but yeah, because damn it, now all the details are blurring around in my head. But yeah, he's the first scene with Herbert outside of the Swedish intro was with Dan, and they kind of meet, but then he kind of like brushes past Dan. I think they're standing in the morgue because isn't that the scene where he's using that laser to drill in that guy's head and get like a brain sample or whatever? Which, by the way, that shot always just of the Q-tip going in the hole in the skull always disturbs me because it looks really, really looks real. Like they did a good job with that particular shot. But yeah, it's just something about like a Q-tip going inside the brain there. Makes my forehead itch for some reason.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. And then we again, when you meet Dan, you're thinking, I'm like, okay, like we got a character here. It's a little level-headed, and
well, you think that he's a good, like he's trying to save the woman's life. The first scene we meet, he's doing chest compressions on a dead woman, trying to get her heart to start again, which is I mean, like, by the way, very realistic chest compression scene, which you don't always get in movies. But there's a level of realism to the medical shit that makes this movie sort of unsettling. But anyway, so your impressions of Dan?
I was like, okay, Dan's like, it just seems like you're Joe Average, and I'm like, okay, so I'm like, okay, we're obviously going to have the conflict is going to come between Dan and Herbert at some point. I did not expect the film to kind of swerve and kind of have Dan basically teaming up with Herbert, in this madcap of experiment. First, there's the reanimating the cat, which now, so first it was a little hard for me to watch that. For our listeners, I'm a cat guy. I have a cat now, and I've grown up my whole life with them. So it's always a little difficult for me to see something happen to them. I was a little shook the first time I saw Pet Cemetery, for that same reason.
That one's the book is really rough because you get the sense that the kids are really attached to the cat, and everybody that's ever had cats as a kid and lost one to getting hit by a car or something, it's just really sad. So yeah, the book Pet Cemetery really tore my nerves up. But yeah,
but yeah, so like that was and now this is where I think Re-Animator, because I was trying to get where was Re-Animator a comedy? Like the only thing I always heard it was like a horror comedy, and I was like, well, where's the comedy coming in here? Well, that instance of Herbert and Dan, uh, fighting off the reanimated cat. It is hilarious, just because you don't actually see the cat the majority of the scene. You basically just have um Jeffrey Combs and Bruce Abbott just like swinging a broomstick around or whatever, um, making just knocking stuff over, and it's hilarious. Like it's hilarious. I'm like, okay, all right. So I was like, okay, this is this is funny. Then they killed the reanimated cat, and they got the remains on the table or whatever, and then Herbert goes ahead and reanimates the already dead cat again. And when you see that come back to life, and um, just the whole gore effects of this movie is um, outstanding. Like
Well,
I don't even think I've ever. I mean, I say it's on par with like Carpenter's The Thing, in terms of just the practical effects here. But yeah, it's gory and it's weird, and then and then out of nowhere, this is where I really was like, wait a minute, how did we get to this point? When the oh god, the Dr. Hill, uh Dr. Hill is about to like blackmail Herbert, and Herbert kills him and chops his head off with a shovel and reanimates his body and his head separately, and now Dr. Hill's head, because he did all this lobotomies and stuff on other people, including Megan's father. Oh yeah, that was kind of funny too. Unfortunately, how he gets like crushed by the door, and then he gets flung all over he gets like flung all over.
The movie is amazing when all chaos breaks loose. Like
Yeah.
every time something like gets out of hand, it's funny, but it's also it doesn't lose that horror edge. Like
Yeah, because like you're kind of thinking like, oh my god, this kid, but then you're just like, wow, this is
it's kind
like
of repulsive and funny at the same time.
yeah. Like the poor man got like crushed by the morgue door, and then he kept getting thrown all around, and then I'm kind of like, well, I mean, well, he's not dead. I was like, he's not dead yet. Then he finally was dead, and then
And I don't think there's enough naked zombies in movies because that always adds a level of how terrifying would that be? There's a
know,
scene
like that, because that's so crazy when you think about it. It's like that is like the one thing you kind of don't see too often, like the idea of the morgue itself. And like you said, yeah, the naked zombie just kind of all coming after you. But Dr. Hill he's been decapitated, and he's got mind control.
that's where it gets a little weird. Like,
Yeah, he got mind control over the zombies, and that's when I was like, what the hell, what the hell am I watching?
because that's almost too supernatural in the science fiction story, like because it's kind of like Frankenstein. I could see the Frankenstein influence with the bringing the dead back to life, obviously, and I can go with the whole glow stick liquid, reanimator juice. I can go with all that. Fine, you don't have to explain how that works. But yeah, the whole mind control part is probably the weakest part of it because they don't explain it well. But yeah,
but
I'll give it a pass for that. But whatever. But yeah, that part's
but I give it huge credit for this. It's what an hour 26 minutes, so it's under 90 minutes, and there's not really any fat on it whatsoever. Almost every scene from the start to the end basically keeps the whole plot moving. Because you're kind of like you're thinking like there's going to be like some there's like some scenes with some downtime or something like that, and there really isn't. It starts, and the prologue kind of when you first meet Herbert in Sweden or whatever, that's kind of like the most separate part of the movie, but everything else pretty much just starts and it goes, and then it goes until hell breaks loose at the end. And then you have that, that final, that final shot after Megan's been strangled, and Dan carries her into the, tries to revive her, and he can't do, they can't revive her, and she's dead, and he's in despair, and then he injects her with the formula, and I actually like that it did this. I was like, are they going to show us her reanimating? No, they just cut the black and you have the scream. And I was like, I thought that was effective a very effective manner to end it.
Yeah, I thought they did a great job with so much of it. The acting, it works for what it like. It's so strange because it could have. I think. Do you know who? You've seen Jeffrey Combs and other things, right?
No, this is the first thing I've seen him make.
But you have seen him in other things. You just didn't know it. He's been in Star Trek a lot, like especially like Deep Space Nine, and you've seen Star Trek Enterprise, right? Like all the way through.
Not all the way. No.
Okay. Well, in the later seasons, there's an Andorian character, and it's hands down outside of Herbert West my favorite Jeffrey Combs. He's great as that character. He's kind of like Herbert West as an Andorian, except for he's not bringing corpses back to life. It's just the way he can be arrogant, and you don't really know what his um you don't really know, like, in as the Andorian character, he actually ends up being a good guy, but like he's just sort of standoffish and arrogant and delivers lines just like Herbert West, like, and he was in Deep Space Nine, but I can't remember. He played a couple characters, but there was one character in particular. Damn it, I'm gonna have to look it up. But yeah, he was in Deep Space Nine, but he's great in that. But so Combs as Herbert West is very theatrical, but there's something about that makes him the perfect Herbert West, because I love the way he delivers the lines, and some of the lines would be ridiculous. Especially the Herbert West lines would be ridiculous if you put the wrong actor, but like he really makes that work for the movie. He's he's always the smartest one in the room. He's a psycho, by the way. Herbert West.
I love when they were in class and he was just being obnoxious and kept snapping the pencil.
Yeah. Yeah, he was so upset about that. The brain dies between 6 and 12 minutes, and he was trying to prove the protagonist of the film is really Dr. Hill. Granted, it's Herbert West, but it's really it's Dr. Hill. Like you were saying, you thought it was going to be Dan versus Herbert, but it was Dan and Herbert versus Dr. Hill for the most part, and I guess the dean, Meg's dad or whatever, Megan's dad. But in a way, I kind of felt like the dean was really just doing what you'd expect the dean to do in that situation. And I kind of think as funny as it was when he got crushed by the door, I felt like there was more sympathy to be had for the dean, whereas Doctor, Dr. Hill is a total asshole, like major asshole, and you realize just how much of an asshole he is when he gets to uh, the scene after Megan's dad is out of commission. When it gets to that scene, you realize just how, when he's like hitting on Megan, you realize Dr. Hill's is genuinely as just much of a psychopath as Herbert West is. But I love how over the top all the acting is in the right ways. Like it works for me, and I think that the cast has chemistry. And I think one of the things that worked for the film is that they had originally written out a screenplay to be a play. I think that was what Stuart Gordon was going to do, or at first was going to do this on stage. I don't know how he would have done it.
It is very theatrical. I could see how the performances, if it was going to be a play first, I can definitely see that informing the performances.
Yeah, and all the actors came from theater. So he basically pulled these theater actors together and had them do they actually could do this entire film, like, without, from beginning to end, just like you would run a play. So I don't know how much rehearsing they did before they shot, but all of these actors could do these scenes off book from beginning scene to the end by memory. Like they knew the entire thing, so they shot it. As far as I know, with maybe the exception of certain effect shots, they shot this movie in order, uh, from beginning to end, and in basic, all the reason why I think it works is because they all know their timing and everything. So I imagine that when Stuart Gordon got on set, being that it was his first movie, with everybody being that well rehearsed, which from experience doesn't always happen. I've never shot anything on even on this level, but I'm just saying most of the time when you're doing a low budget indie film or whatever, you get on set, you're not that prepared, and you haven't had that much time with the actors to do that much rehearsing. So to have that much rehearsal, that had to have been a great thing for him, because then he could concentrate on how to shoot it, because they knew their parts inside and out. uh, I uh, I I thought that was, I mean, even Dan and Barbara Crampton, I can't remember the guy who plays Dan's name, Bruce Abbott and Barbara Crampton are great together, and you even buy the fact that they genuinely have a relationship. Like the only thing that, of course, sours that is her relationship with her father, which I have some questions about how college works in medical school specifically. As far as like, I understand in a lot of ways like why the dean expels them and everything, but how much power does a dean on at college? Can he like really just say, I'm rescinding your student loans, you're both
Yeah.
expelled? There's no board of review, there's no appeals process, like you just kicked out of school and lose your student loans. Can the dean do that? Like, I don't know, I'd have to ask somebody who's like in administration at a college. But yeah, that's crazy. That kind of blew me away. The I mean, there's really, like you said, I think that the hypnotizing ability of Dr. Hill, I think that was something that was cut, like what it actually explains why he's able to do that. I think that was cut from the movie, but I'm not sure when and where and what the explanation was. But the original cut of the film was 2.5 hours long, and they cut it down to where it is now, which was definitely the right choice. But I, I'm, I had heard somewhere before that the hypnosis, and the Dr. Hill's ability to hypnotize was explained in the original script and in the cut, but I'm not sure what the explanation was, unless he was just already had the ability to hypnotize people and he was still able to do it when he was dead. I guess might have been the explanation, but I'm not sure how that was supposed to work. But apparently that's still in there, because I mean, it couldn't really be cut out without losing a lot of other stuff. But the reason why that comes out of nowhere is because all the scenes that explain it are gone, uh, which is probably for the better. I think the movie works fine. The I mean, it works for me. I'm smiling through way too much of this movie. I probably have mental problems. I like Dan. I've also seen Bride of Re-Animator, which actually expands quite a bit on Dan and Herbert's relationship. But I like Dan. I mean, he's sort of. You said he's kind of like kind of like, or it comes across like he's gonna be kind of the everyman, and he kind of is, but he's also supposedly like a really good. From the minute we see him, I think they kind of put him in sympathetic, like, because obviously he's trying really hard to save this woman and everybody else. By the way, there's some weird trivia on this movie because I was looking it up, but the woman that he's trying to save at the beginning of the film, uh, the woman on the gurney at the very beginning when he's doing the chest compressions, she this can't be real trivia, but this is on IMDb in the trivia section, that she was a dildo enthusiast and that she used to hide dildos and the fake bodies in the morgue.
I wouldn't be surprised. If it's tied to this movie's history, I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean,
I'd be willing to buy it.
I have questions though, man. Like, uh, first of all, I didn't know that dildo enthusiast was something that you could just be like. And two, how expensive would that be just to buy? I mean, I'm just saying. I've seen the prices on some of them. How could it be that expensive to like? How could someone afford something that expensive? Like buy multiple dildos just to play pranks on the people on the movie set? But anyway, I digress. that's our opening scene with Dan. But then they make a point to say he's very that he's doing really great in medical school, that he's like almost like their prize student. And then we see him making out with Barbara Crampton, which I mean, even she's still beautiful to this day. And you know, we're talking like 1985 Barbara Crampton. He's making out with her in the hallway, and then the next scene we see, you know, him getting to have sex with Barbara Crampton under a Talking Heads poster, living the dream. That's all I'm saying. He's just living the dream, and everything falls apart for him. Like he's even got Barbara Crampton's dad's. I'm gonna call her Meg instead of Barbara Crampton. He's got Megan's dad's approval until which that was the first sign that was the scene I was trying to think of. Dr. Hill is immediately telling Megan's dad that she doesn't need to see her, you know, Dan anymore because he's living with Herbert West now. And I'm like, what a jerk. If I were the dean, I'd have been telling Dr. Hill to go fuck himself. Well, it's none of your business, Dr. Hill, first of all, who my daughter dates. But Dr. Hill from the very beginning. And when the first time I saw it, I didn't realize that it's because Dr. Hill's trying to move in on Megan, which is strange. Because that gets really creepy later when her dad has gone completely nuts from the Re-Animator serum, and he's trying to move in and make a pass on her. So it's really.
And then there's the whole when she's kidnapped or whatever, and the whole.
Oh well, my God! So that
Dr. Hill's head.
That's actually the scene that if I was going the scene I was gonna say, as far as in Re-Animator, there's a lot of like gory stuff, but it's all pretty much on the same level as like something from Evil Dead, and Evil Dead has the tree rape scene, which is a lot. But I think that the scene in Re-Animator that makes the movie hard to recommend to just an everybody, like an anybody type of movie, like you have to remember the assault scene with the severed head. Like that's something I still to this day have never seen in any other film, nor would I recommend anyone ever film anything like that. But that scene was so uncomfortable that and I don't know how true this is, but apparently the actor David Gale, who played Dr. Hill, who plays the severed head in that scene, like he went to see it with his wife when the movie first came out, and she was, which I have something to say about this too, but she was so appalled by that scene, which why wouldn't he warn her? Trigger warning, dude, come on. But yeah. She was so appalled by this scene that she got up and left and never came home. Like, first of all, good for, you know, probably good riddance, because wow, talk about taking something way too far. It's a freaking movie. But two, wow, that seems a lot, man. Like that ceases to be a horror comedy and just becomes pure horror. Like horror, it's just a lot. Like it's a whole lot to put on the screen. Even now, like if you did that scene, it would be shocking. That's also the scene that it didn't actually ever get officially put on the video nasties in the UK, but it did get. They basically said, we're not going to allow you to release this movie in the theaters if you don't cut that scene. And I don't know if they ever, you know, cut. I'm sure that they cut certain things for certain countries like they always do. But yeah, that was the scene that everybody, like, you know, they didn't like the guy, chopping the head off with the shovel and any of that stuff. But a scene of severed head, you know, giving oral to Barbara Crampton was a step too far for a lot of people. But yeah, including Dr. Hill's wife in real life. So
wow,
I don't know how true that is, man. Maybe they were already fighting, and that was just she was like.
Not saying that she couldn't have felt a certain way about the scene, but yeah, maybe that was just like, all right, not only do I not like this scene, but like I said, maybe he's an ass in real life, and that was, her out.
Or she was just like, maybe maybe, who knows? I don't know anything about him or her, so I'm not going to speculate on what caused their marriage to fall. But I think that she was just like, I just can't imagine being so offended by a scene in a movie. She was, I think her words from what I read were something to the effect of, how could you, like she was genuinely like taking it that he was like he was actually doing what was being portrayed on. like like he had committed a sex act on camera or something. It was just kind of crazy. But yeah, it's a shocking scene, and I'm surprised how freaking cool Barbara Crampton is even to this day about things, because I could only imagine the amount of people that walk up to her at a convention, and she's very active in movies even now. Like she's got a movie called Jacob's Wife. I think it's available on Shudder. It's a vampire film. And it's gotten like really good reviews and stuff. She's still active. I just can't imagine how many times she's been approached by some creepy dude, and I can only imagine the pickup lines that could have been used at a horror convention or whatever, or online. I just know it. But she seems like a genuinely good sport, and still has a good relation. Or still, I mean, Stuart Gordon has since passed away, but she still had a good relationship with him because she also worked on Castle Freak and more famously From Beyond. So, which was another, I think, more direct H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. Oh, there were some cool crossovers too to a couple of other films that we like. I was just researching things before the show, and I'm glad I did, because this was super cool. The which I had heard this before, because I had watched Re-Animator with the second time I watched it with Heather, and watched it with Joe Bob on the last drive-in on Shudder, and so he always goes in between, like where there would normally be commercial breaks if you're watching on TV. He breaks in and kind of talks about the movie. But one of the cool things that he mentioned, and what's mentioned on IMDb, is the stunt double for Arnold Schwarzenegger, who worked on The Terminator, and strangely enough, the only other movie that it says he was his stunt double was Jingle All the Way, which seems really bizarre. But he was the naked zombie in the morgue. That was who that was. He was Arnold's stunt double. And another Terminator, but Terminator 2 crossover this time, was the medical building. The med school building in the movie is actually the Cyberdyne building in Terminator 2. I thought that was kind of neat.
Oh, wow.
Oh, have you ever seen Return of the Living Dead?
No.
Okay, well, that's another really fun, transgressive, weirdo zombie movie, but it's probably more on the comedy side. But there's a scene where there's a gurney, like a really memorable scene with a zombie on the gurney, and the gurney that he's wheeling the woman to the morgue in at the beginning of the movie is actually the same gurney from Return of the Living Dead. They were able to borrow it because it had a hole cut in already to have, to do the fake outs with the body, with the prosthetic bodies and the real heads and everything. So one of the funniest things to do if you ever want on a movie like this, it's not really that funny if you're just doing it on random movies, but it's hilarious when you're doing it on movies like this, is to look at the parents guide on IMDb. Have you ever done that?
I have heard of it. I've never looked.
So they never mention, not once. So like if I was wondering what kind of content this movie had, it basically just breaks it down to like sex and nudity, violence and gore, profanity, alcohol, drugs and smoking, frightening and intense scenes. Not one time does it mention the head giving head. Oh, wait, here it is. A woman is laid naked on operating table, breasts and pubic hair are visible. Her bare breasts are groped and licked by a zombie. That's it. It doesn't say that it implies a sexual assault, really, which is what it does. Like, it's very much a sexual assault scene. It's very disturbing. It doesn't imply that at all in the parent guide. Like, come on, person that, like, most of these parent guides are ridiculous too. Like, a group of zombies' butts are shown for a few minutes, non-sexual. Then don't put it there, because this is supposed to be the sex and nudity set. I mean, the butt thing is nudity, but anyway. I mean, there's everything in a movie. Like, there's a scene with a man with his shirt off in a non-sexual way. It'll make it into this category. So it's very strange that they don't, it's so funny to read these. Let's see. Man severs another man's head with a shovel. At first, it is only implied, and then the camera cuts and shows the process in great detail. Man's eyes implode. It is on screen and very gory. Man's head is drilled into to get a sample of brain matter. And this one's the one that grossed me out, the Q-tip into the hole. One use of bastard and bitch. I don't even remember that. A few graphic profanities. I don't remember any graphic. I don't remember it having much profanity. The final fight sequence is very intense. the lots of cheesy, fake looking, over the top gore. All right, motherfucker. I like the gore in this movie. I think it looks really good. Definitely recommend it, but I do not recommend it if you're watching it with someone who's not a horror fan, or even if they're a horror fan and they don't particularly care for gore, or they have certain, like even like certain things are going to bother you. Like, I mean, I do think that it has a little more. I don't know. I mean, if you're a horror fan, you're probably going to like it if you like more transgressive stuff. If you like things that are a little more over the edge and experimental, I guess is the word. But if you just, I wouldn't watch it in mixed company. It's just one of those things. Going to be either it's an acquired taste or you like this kind of stuff already. But yeah, I would just be careful about who you watch this one with.
And then to imagine that this, Re-Animator was released in 1985, and then who would have thought that 4 years later, Stuart Gordon and Brian Usna, I think that's how you would say it,
Yeah.
the producer, they would create the story for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh wow. Okay. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Which was a favorite of mine as a kid. Holy crap. I had no idea that they did that. That's crazy. Wow. I did not know that, man, because I only knew Stuart Gordon as Re-Animator and From Beyond and Castle Freak. That's what I knew him from. So I did not realize that I was a Stuart Gordon fan as a little kid. That's cool.
Yeah, it's always one of them things when you find out that you were, you find it's just like when I found out that, I like Guardians of the Galaxy. Then I find out that James Gunn wrote Scooby Doo.
That's funny too, because he started out as a working with Trauma Pictures, I think was, and then I think Slither was the first movie I ever heard of that he did before, and I had never seen it, but before Guardians of the Galaxy, that was the movie that I had seen the cover of that he had worked on. That's crazy though. But yeah, I mean, I think Re-Animator is one of those movies that after you think about it, the first time you watch it, it is a genuine what the hell type of thing. But I think
Yes.
I think after you think about it for a while, that you start coming back around on it. And the next time you watch it is when it's either a movie that you end up loving or at least appreciating. Like I personally, this is the third time I've seen it, and I'm not like a diehard. I don't. It's not Evil Dead to me. Like Evil Dead still as far as and Return of the Living Dead to me are still the go-to weirdo zombie movies. But Re-Animator is definitely up there. I like it. I think it works for what it is, and it makes me laugh, and it also does make me feel like I need a shower afterwards. So it's a unique experience.
I definitely agree with that. Agree with that. Like,
I was a little bit worried because your reaction to it was like, "What?" Like,
no, it wasn't a case where I was like, oh my god, like I'm pissed at Jake for suggesting this. It's just that.
Well, if you ever are, be honest. Like, I'm totally cool with that. I just like, I wish you had never made me watch this movie.
No, it's because what it is like I don't. It's not too often that I watch something that's kind of like just weird. This was one of those cases. So I was like, yeah, this movie is just weird. I would probably agree with you, if it came to something a little more in line with that, I would definitely probably go with you with like Evil Dead over that, which I can't wait till we get the remake on our list there. I can't wait till we get to that, because that's my favorite of that type of movie. But no, Re-Animator is certainly something. And I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I'm cool. I'm like, I got it. And I'm curious. It's got me curious enough where I'm like, maybe I need to check out Bride of Re-Animator now.
I still haven't seen the third one, which is on Tubi, I think. Okay, so the first Re-Animator is, like I said, them basically wanting to do a Frankenstein story, and how it came about was Stuart Gordon and Brian Usna and whoever else were just hanging out one day, and they were talking about monster movies, and they were specifically talking about vampire films, and Stuart Gordon said, I'm kind of tired of all the Dracula movies. Like, there's too many Dracula movies. I wish somebody would do another Frankenstein. And this is in like the early 80s or whatever. And maybe the only Frankenstein movie they had seen was that Sting movie that you and Stuart were talking about last week. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, there obviously was a lot. Like, it's funny because I'm thinking now everybody talks about how vampires are like oversaturated, but even in 1984 or 3 or whenever it was they were having this conversation, they were talking about how there's too many vampire movies. So, I mean, I don't know what was going on, but because it seemed like to me the vampire thing came back in like the mid to late 80s with like Fright Night and the Lost Boys and all that. But I mean, anyway, I think he was specifically talking about how many Dracula adaptations there were through the years from the 30s on to when they're having this conversation. And if he's talking about that, yeah, there's a shit ton of Dracula adaptations, and there's not as many Frankenstein. So he was basically saying somebody should do another Frankenstein. And one of his friends said, have you ever read H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator? And he said no, but he was familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, so he had read like all the famous ones. So I think he was in Chicago, so he went to the library in Chicago and found H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator and sat in the library and read it, because I'm guessing it was a short story. I think he wrote, and I could be totally wrong on because I haven't researched it, but I think H.P. Lovecraft wrote those Re-Animator stories maybe for a magazine, or he wrote them for his publishing company, but they paid him like $5 a story. So he wrote like more than one Re-Animator story. Like, he wrote sequels to it just to make money, and he basically didn't consider them like good examples of his work. So apparently Stuart Gordon took influence of the original Re-Animator story. He borrowed elements of it, like the character of Herbert West that character is named in the H.P. Lovecraft story, and the character that he used for Dan didn't even have a name in the story, so he came up with the name Dan Kane, and he used the framework of that story and basically the first half of it, and then basically wrote his own Frankenstein story and called it H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator, so he could keep the title,
Huh.
And so really it's more of his own thing with some elements of Lovecraft and the character of Herbert West. And then Bride of Re-Animator actually adapts more of the original Re-Animator story than the first movie did. So that's how that all came about. We'll definitely, when we start watching, like when we get into our sequels, when we're watching a lot of sequels, we have to throw Bride of Re-Animator in there just for shits and giggles. But I appreciate everyone joining us for Photo Flow, and I'm Jake Coleman. You can find me on Twitter at Jake Coleman.
Catch me on Twitter at Deacon05OC.
All right, and follow us on Photo Flow Terror at Photo Flow Terror on Twitter as well, and continue conversation. If anyone has any suggestions or cool memories, you can also follow the voicemail link in each episode of the show has a voicemail link, so feel free to send us a voicemail. We'll play it on the show. Any feedback, rate and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next week.
Podcast Ask Us Many Questions. Who will listen and who will return next week? Who will take the time to rate and review? Check for a new episode of Photo Flow every week. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Photo Flow Terror, and Instagram on PhotoFlow_terror. Thank you for listening to Photo Flow. We'll find the terror in the smiles.